The metal floor was cold against Hyunwoo's knees. His hands were tied behind his back with thick alien rope that cut into his wrists. Blood dripped from his split lip onto the dark gray surface of the Vorten ship. Around him, reptilian soldiers stood in formation, their yellow eyes watching every move he made. Commander Hyunwoo had been a Green Beret for 12 years. He had fought on 6 different planets and survived things that would break most men, but he had never been in a situation like this. The Vorthens had caught him during a scouting mission on Kepler 442b. Now he was on their flagship, about to become their message to the galaxy. General Thexvar stepped forward. His scales were dark green with gold markings that showed his high rank. He was tall, even for a Vorthan, and his voice sounded like rocks grinding together when he spoke. "Human soldier," Thexvar said in broken English, "you will die today. But first you will help us teach your people a lesson." Hyunwoo raised his head and looked the alien general in the eye. "I'm not helping you with anything." Thexvar laughed, a sound like air escaping from a broken machine. "You do not have choice. Your death will show all humans what happens when they fight the Vorthen Empire." The general turned to face the cameras that his crew had set up around the room. These cameras would broadcast what was about to happen to every planet in Vorthen space. Billions of beings would watch. The Vorthens wanted everyone to see human weakness. "People of the galaxy," Thexvar began, speaking into the main camera. "Today you will witness the fate of those who oppose our rule. This human thought he could spy on us. He thought his training and his weapons made him special. Now he will die like all enemies of the Empire." Back on Earth, Captain Jin-ho sat in the Intelligence Center in Seoul. His job was to monitor alien communications and watch for threats to human colonies. When the Vorthen broadcast started, every screen in the room lit up with warnings. "Sir," called out Sergeant Haewon from her station. "Emergency broadcast from Vorthen space. They're transmitting on all frequencies." Jin-ho's blood went cold when he saw Hyunwoo on the screen. He had served with the man 5 years ago on Europa Station. They had been friends. "Get me Admiral So Young," Jin-ho ordered. Right now, the broadcast continued. Thexvar walked around Hyunwoo like a predator circling its prey. "This human has a name," the general said to the cameras. "Commander Hyunwoo of Earth Special Forces. He came to our territory thinking he could hide from us. But we are everywhere. We see everything." Hyunwoo said nothing. He kept his eyes focused straight ahead, his jaw set firm. He had been trained for this. Every Green Beret knew that capture was possible. They all knew they might die far from home, alone and forgotten. But Hyunwoo was not forgotten. On 17 different human military bases across the galaxy, soldiers stopped what they were doing to watch. On Earth, families gathered around their screens in horror. On the colonies, workers left their jobs to see what the Vorthens were doing to one of their protectors. Admiral So Young received Jin-ho's call in her office at Earth Defense Command. She was a small woman, but everyone who served under her knew she had nerves of steel and a mind like a computer. When she saw the broadcast, her face showed no emotion at all. "How long until this reaches the public networks?" she asked Jin-ho. "It's already there, Admiral. The Vorthens are making sure everyone sees this." So Young nodded slowly. She pressed a button on her desk that connected her to President Daewon's office. "Sir, we have a situation." On the Vorthen ship, soldiers brought out a rope with a noose already tied. They hung it from a metal beam above a trapdoor that had been built into the floor. This was not something they had put together quickly. The Vorthans had planned this execution carefully. "Your people abandoned you," Thexvar told Hyunwoo as 2 soldiers forced him to his feet. "They sent you to die alone, far from your home planet. This is how humans treat their warriors." Hyunwoo finally spoke. His voice was steady and clear. "My people don't abandon anyone. And I'm not alone." Thexvar made that grinding laugh again. "Look around you, human. I see only Vorthan soldiers. I see only Vorthen ships. You are alone." They put the noose around Hyunwoo's neck and forced him to stand on the trapdoor. The cameras moved closer to capture every detail. The general wanted the galaxy to see the fear in the human's eyes, but there was no fear. Hyunwoo stood straight and tall. He looked directly into the main camera, speaking to people he could not see on worlds he would never visit. "My name is Commander Hyunwoo, 7th Special Forces Group, Earth Defense Command," he said. "I was born in Busan. I have served my people for 12 years. I am not afraid to die for them." He paused, then continued. "To my family, I love you. To my brothers in arms, carry on the mission. To any human watching this, remember what you're seeing. Remember who did this. Remember that honor matters more than life. Texfar stepped forward, angry that the human was not begging for mercy. Enough words. Time to die. Wait, Hyunwoo said. I have something else to say. The general almost told his soldiers to pull the trapdoor anyway. But he was curious. What could this human possibly say that would matter now? Hyunwoo's voice carried across the galaxy. Tell my brothers I kept the faith. Earth remembers her children. On Earth, Admiral So-young watched the broadcast with President Daewon and a room full of military officers. When Hyunwoo spoke those final words, So-young checked her watch. She wanted to know the exact time. 9 minutes, she whispered to herself. It takes 9 minutes for the signal to reach Earth. Texfar raised his hand. The cameras focused on him as he prepared to give the signal. He wanted this moment to be remembered forever. The moment when the Vorthan Empire showed the galaxy that humans could be broken. His hand fell. The trapdoor opened. Commander. Hyunwoo dropped into darkness. The broadcast ended with Texfar facing the cameras one last time. This is the fate of all who oppose us. Let the human colonies remember this day. Let them know that the Vorthan Empire is not merciful to its enemies. The screens went black. In the intelligence center on Earth, Captain Jin-ho stared at the empty display. Around him, his people sat in shocked silence. Sergeant Haewon was crying. Others sat with their hands clenched into fists. Jin-ho picked up his phone and called Admiral So-young again. Ma'am, he said. It's done. They killed him. So-young's voice was quiet but deadly. I know, I watched. How long ago did this actually happen? Jin-ho checked the transmission data. 9 minutes ago, Admiral. The signal just reached us. 9 minutes, So-young repeated. They think 9 minutes and millions of miles will protect them from what's coming. She hung up and turned to President Daewon. Sir, I need authorization to activate the Ghost Fleet. The president looked at her with sad eyes. How many ships? All of them. Admiral So-young stood in the command center deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland. The room was filled with screens showing star maps, ship positions, and communication channels from across the galaxy. Officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency, but everyone could feel the tension in the air. President Daewon sat at the main conference table, surrounded by his advisors and the highest-ranking military officers on Earth. They had all watched the broadcast. They had all seen Commander Hyunwoo die. The Ghost Fleet has been in position for 3 years, So-young explained to the room. After the Vorthans broke the peace treaty on Centauri Prime, we knew this day might come. We've been preparing. Dr. Tae-min, the head of military intelligence, pulled up a holographic display of Vorthan space. Red dots appeared throughout the alien territory, marking the positions of hidden human ships. We have assets in 17 systems, he said. Automated warships disguised as asteroids, space junk, and dead satellites. Each one has been hibernating, waiting for activation codes. Colonel Minji stepped forward. She was the architect of the Ghost Fleet program, a woman who had spent 5 years planning for this exact moment. The ships are equipped with Prometheus weapons, she explained. Fusion charges powerful enough to crack planets. We can eliminate their military infrastructure in every system simultaneously. President Daewon looked around the room. How many people will die? The weapons are designed for precision strikes, Minji replied. Military targets only. We're not the Vorthans. We don't kill civilians. But So-young's expression was hard as stone. Some of their worlds will become uninhabitable. Military academies, shipyards, command centers. When you destroy installations that big, there's collateral damage. How much collateral damage? The president asked. Dr. Tae-min consulted his tablet. Conservative estimates suggest 2 million military personnel dead in the first wave. Maybe 50,000 civilians who live too close to military zones. The room fell silent. These were not small numbers. This would be the largest military action in human history. President Daewon closed his eyes and thought about Hyunwoo hanging from that rope. He thought about the message the Vorthans were trying to send. They wanted to teach humanity about fear. They executed a prisoner of war on live television, he said quietly. They broke every law of civilized warfare. They think distance protects them. He opened his eyes and looked directly at Admiral So-young. Show them how wrong they are. Authorization granted. So-young nodded and walked to her command station. She placed her hand on a biometric scanner and spoke clearly into the microphone. This is Admiral So-young, Supreme Commander, Earth Defense Command. Authorization code Alpha 779 Charlie. Ghost Fleet, you are weapons free. Execute Operation Prometheus. Across the command center, officers began transmitting activation codes to 17 different star systems. The messages traveled through quantum-encrypted channels, reaching their destinations instantly despite the vast distances involved. In the Kepler 442b system, where Hyunwoo had been captured, a piece of metal debris floating near the fourth planet suddenly came alive. Running lights flickered on along its hull as internal systems activated. The debris was actually the human warship Silent Vengeance, commanded by Lieutenant Boram. Boram and her crew of 6 had been in cryogenic sleep for 2 years, waiting for this moment. Their ship had been positioned just outside the system's detection range, disguised as a chunk of ice from a comet tail. The activation signal woke them all at once. Boram opened her eyes in the cryo chamber and immediately began the emergency wake-up sequence. Within 5 minutes, her entire crew was awake and at their stations. "Status report," she ordered as she strapped herself into the command chair. Sergeant Wu Jin checked his weapon systems. "Prometheus charges are armed and ready. Target coordinates confirmed. 4th Hand Military Academy on the 3rd moon." "Communications?" Boram asked. Ensign Hyejin worked at her station, receiving activation confirmations from 16 other ghost ships. "All vessels report ready status." Boram looked at the tactical display. The Vorthon Military Academy was a massive complex that trained 50,000 of their elite officers at any given time. It was heavily defended, surrounded by orbital weapons platforms and patrol ships. None of that mattered now. "Time to target?" she asked. 18 minutes at current approach speed, Wu Jin replied. "But ma'am, they'll detect us long before we're in firing range." Boram smiled coldly. "No, they won't, because we're not approaching. We're already here." She pressed a series of buttons on her console. The Silent Vengeance had been positioned exactly where it needed to be. The Prometheus weapon didn't need to be fired from close range. Launching in 3, 2, 1, firing. A single missile left the Silent Vengeance and accelerated toward the Vorthon Academy. It would take 4 minutes to reach its target. 4 minutes for the Vorthons to realize what was happening. The same scene was playing out in 16 other star systems. Human ships that had been hidden for years were suddenly active, launching devastating attacks on Vorthon military installations. On Earth, Admiral So Young watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. Every ghost ship was performing exactly as planned. The Vorthons had no idea what was coming. "First weapons impact in 3 minutes," reported Colonel Minji. "All ships report successful launch." President Daewon stood behind So Young, watching the countdown timers on the screens. "Will this end the war?" "This will end their ability to fight a war," So Young replied. The Vorthons built their empire on the idea that their enemies couldn't reach their home territories. "We're about to prove them wrong." Dr. Taemin looked up from his intelligence reports. "Admiral, we're intercepting Vorthon communications. They're starting to realize something is wrong, but they don't know what." On the main screen, a communication intercept from Vorthon High Command played out in translated text. "Unknown contacts detected in sectors 7, 12, and 15. Ships appear to be launching weapons. Origin unknown, investigating." So Young allowed herself a small smile. By the time they figure out what's happening, it will be too late. The countdown timer reached 0. Across 17 star systems, Prometheus weapons struck their targets simultaneously. The Vorthon Military Academy, where Lieutenant Boram had aimed her missile, simply vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. The explosion was visible from 3 different planets. Similar explosions lit up the darkness across Vorthon space. Shipyards that had been building warships for decades were turned into clouds of radioactive gas. Command centers that coordinated the movements of entire fleets ceased to exist. Military research facilities working on new weapons became craters in the ground. Back on Earth, the command center erupted in controlled celebration. Officers reported successful strikes from every ghost ship. The first phase of Operation Prometheus was complete, but Admiral So Young was not celebrating. She was already planning the second phase. "Status of Vorthon fleet assets?" she asked. Dr. Taemin consulted his screens. "Their main battle fleets are intact, but they've lost all their support infrastructure. No shipyards, no fuel depots, no command centers to coordinate them." "Perfect," So Young said. "A fleet without supply lines is just expensive scrap metal floating in space." Colonel Minji looked at the tactical displays. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from some Vorthon regional commanders. So Young's expression did not change. Tell them we'll consider surrender terms after they return Commander Yunwu's body for burial. Ma'am. You heard me. They want mercy? They can start by showing respect for the man they murdered. Lieutenant Boram watched the explosion through her ship's sensors. The Vorthon Military Academy was gone, reduced to nothing but expanding gas and debris. 50,000 of their best officers had died in an instant. Target destroyed, reported Sergeant Wu Jin from the weapons station. Complete elimination confirmed. Boram nodded, but she felt no satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge or glory. This was about sending a message that would echo across the galaxy. You don't execute human prisoners and expect to walk away. Next target, she ordered. Keitha Prime orbital shipyards. The silent vengeance turned toward its secondary objective. Keitha Prime was one of the Vorthon Empire's most important industrial worlds. Its orbital shipyards could build 50 warships at once. Not anymore. Across Vorthon space, similar scenes were playing out. Ships that had been hiding as space junk for years were suddenly the most dangerous weapons in the galaxy. The Ghost Fleet was fully awake now, and it was angry. In the Proxima Centauri system, the human ship Knight's Edge, commanded by Captain Young Su, had just destroyed a Vorthon research station. The facility had been working on new weapons designed specifically to kill humans. The irony was not lost on the captain. Weapons away, reported his tactical officer Ensign Dong Ho. Research station eliminated. 43 scientists confirmed dead. Young Su felt a moment of regret. Scientists weren't soldiers. But these scientists had been designing weapons to commit genocide against his people. Sometimes the line between combatant and civilian wasn't as clear as anyone wanted it to be. Captain, called out his communications officer, Petty Officer Sujin. Receiving emergency transmission from Earth Command. Admiral So Young's image appeared on the main screen. She looked tired, but her voice was steady and commanding. All Ghost Fleet vessels, this is Admiral So Young. Phase 1 is complete. 17 primary targets have been eliminated. Phase 2 begins now. Target all secondary installations, fuel depots, communication arrays, supply bases. Leave their fleets intact but helpless. Young Su understood the strategy. A warship without fuel was just an expensive piece of metal. A fleet without communications couldn't coordinate attacks. A military without supplies couldn't fight a war. Acknowledged, Admiral, he replied. Knight's Edge moving to secondary targets. On the Vorthon homeworld of Vorthak Prime, General Thexvar stood in the High Command Center, watching his empire fall apart in real time. Reports flooded in from across Vorthon space. Massive explosions, destroyed installations, and ships appearing out of nowhere. How is this possible? He demanded from his intelligence chief, Colonel Zethal. Where did these human ships come from? Our sensors showed nothing. Zethal's scales had turned pale with fear. General, the attacks are too coordinated. 17 systems hit simultaneously with perfect timing. This was planned years in advance. That's impossible. We've been monitoring human ship movements constantly. We would have detected any fleet large enough to do this. Unless, Zethal said quietly, they weren't moving. What if these ships have been in position for years waiting? Thexavar felt cold dread creeping up his spine. The humans had outplayed them completely, while the Vorthons had been making threats and flexing their military power. Humanity had been quietly positioning weapons throughout Vorthon space. Get me Admiral Corvin, Thexvar ordered. I need to know the status of our battle fleets. Admiral Corvin appeared on the communication screen, his scaled face grim. General, our fleets are intact, but we have a problem. The humans destroyed our fuel processing stations. Our ships have maybe 6 hours of operational time before they need to return to base. And our bases? Also destroyed. Along with our repair facilities, our ammunition depots, and our communication networks. Thexvar realized the full scope of what had happened. The humans hadn't tried to destroy the Vorthon military. They had done something much more clever and much more devastating. They had made the Vorthon military irrelevant. Back in human space, Lieutenant Boram was approaching her next target. Keitha Prime's orbital shipyards were massive structures, each one the size of a small city. They had been building Vorthon warships for over a century. Approaching firing position, reported Wu Jin. Prometheus weapon armed and ready. Boram looked at the tactical display. The shipyards were beautiful in their own way, a testament to Vorthon engineering and industrial power. In a few minutes they would be debris. Any Vorthon ships in the area? she asked. Ensign Hyegen checked her sensors. 6 patrol vessels, but they're too far away to interfere. They probably don't even know we're here yet. Boram opened a communication channel on all Vorthan frequencies. She wanted them to hear what she had to say. Attention Vorthan vessels and installations. This is Lieutenant Boram of the Earth Defense Force. You executed one of our soldiers in cold blood. You broadcast his death to humiliate us. You thought distance would protect you from consequences. She paused, letting her words sink in. You were wrong. This is for Commander Hyunwoo. This is for every human prisoner you've tortured and killed. This is so you'll remember that honor matters. She closed the channel and looked at Wu Jin. Fire! The Prometheus weapon streaked toward Keitha Prime's shipyards. The Vorthon patrol ships finally detected it, but they were too far away to intercept. They could only watch as their most important industrial facility was destroyed. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. A new star briefly appeared in the sky as the shipyards were consumed by nuclear fire. 200 years of Vorthon naval construction capability vanished in seconds. Similar messages were being broadcast across Vorthon space. Human commanders wanted the aliens to understand exactly why this was happening. This wasn't random violence or conquest. This was justice. Captain Youngsu destroyed a fuel depot that supplied an entire Vorthon battle group. Commander Jiwoo eliminated a communication center that coordinated defenses for 3 star systems. Lieutenant Hae Young took out a research facility working on new torture techniques for human prisoners. Each attack was precise, devastating, and impossible to defend against. The Ghost Fleet had been positioned perfectly, with overlapping fields of fire that covered every important Vorthon military installation. On Earth, Admiral So Young watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Every ghost ship was performing flawlessly. The Vorthons were learning a lesson that would echo through galactic history. Admiral, reported Colonel Minji, we're receiving surrender offers from 12 different Vorthon regional commanders. How generous of them, So Young replied coldly. What are they offering? Complete withdrawal from contested systems, recognition of human territorial claims, prisoner exchanges. So Young thought about Hyunwoo hanging from that rope. She thought about the message the Vorthons had tried to send by murdering him on live television. Tell them we'll consider their offers when General Thexvar is delivered to us in chains, she said, and when they return every human prisoner they've ever taken. President Daewon approached So Young's station. Admiral, how long can we maintain this pace of attack? Each ghost ship has enough firepower for 6 more strikes, she replied. But I don't think we'll need that many. Look at their communications traffic. The intercepts from Vorthon space were becoming increasingly desperate. Military commanders were calling for reinforcements that couldn't reach them. Regional governors were declaring independence from the central government. Some Vorthon colonies were already raising white flags. Their empire is collapsing, So Young observed. Not because we're conquering their territory, but because we've made it impossible for them to hold it together. Dr. Taemin looked up from his intelligence station. Admiral, we're detecting massive population movements on several Vorthon worlds. It looks like their civilians are fleeing the major cities. So Young nodded. Smart people. They know what's coming next. She opened a communication channel to all Ghost Fleet vessels. All ships, this is Admiral So Young. Begin Phase 3. Target all remaining military infrastructure. Make it clear that the Vorthon Empire is finished as a military power. Across 17 star systems, human warships that had been ghosts in the darkness became the most feared weapons in known space. The Vorthon Empire had ruled through fear and violence for 2 centuries. Now they were learning what it felt like to be afraid. General Thexvar stood in the war room of Vorthak Prime's high command, watching his empire die in real time. The massive display screens that once showed Vorthon dominance across 43 star systems now painted a picture of total collapse. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Each light represented a destroyed military installation, a severed communication link, or a colony that had stopped responding to Central Command. In 6 hours, the humans had accomplished what the Vorthon Empire's enemies had failed to do in 2 centuries. General, called out his aide, Lieutenant Yextar, urgent communication from the Kepler system. Admiral Vorthak is requesting permission to retreat. Retreat to where? Thexvar snapped. The humans destroyed our forward bases 3 hours ago. Colonel Zethal approached with a data tablet. His scales were still pale with shock. Sir, we've lost 70% of our military infrastructure. Fuel production is down 80%. Our communication network is operating at 15% capacity. Thexvar grabbed the tablet and scrolled through the reports. Each one was worse than the last. The Vorthon Military Academy destroyed. The research facilities on Proxima 7, gone. The shipyards that had built their fleet. Radioactive debris. How many ships do the humans have out there? He demanded. Our best estimate is 17 vessels, Zethal replied. Small crews, maybe 6 or 7 beings per ship. But their weapons... 17 ships, Thexvar repeated. 17 ships are destroying an empire that controls a quarter of known space. He thought about the human he had executed just hours earlier. Commander Yunwu had stood on that trapdoor without fear, speaking about honor and faith. At the time, Thexvar had thought the human was just trying to die bravely. Now he understood. Yunwu had known something that Thexvar didn't. He had known that his people would answer his death with overwhelming force. He had known that humanity would not let his murder go unpunished. Sir, Lieutenant Yextar called out. We're receiving another surrender offer from the humans. Thexvar looked up from the tablet. What do they want now? The same thing they demanded an hour ago. They want you delivered to them in custody. They want all human prisoners released, and they want our complete withdrawal from all contested systems. And if we refuse? Yextar swallowed nervously. Admiral So Young's message was quite specific, sir. She said they would continue destroying our infrastructure until we agreed to their terms. Thexvar walked to the main display screen. It showed a tactical map of Vorthon space. Red zones marked areas where human ghost ships were operating. The red zones covered nearly every important system in the Empire. On Earth, Admiral So Young sat in her command chair, watching the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. The Ghost Fleet was performing even better than she had hoped. Every target was being eliminated with surgical precision. Status report, she ordered. Colonel Minji consulted her screens. Phase 3 is 60% complete. We've destroyed their remaining fuel depots, communication arrays, and supply bases. Their battle fleets are running out of operational time. Casualties on our side? 0. The Vorthons still haven't figured out where our ships are hiding. President Daewon approached So Young's station. Admiral, we're receiving reports from our embassy on neutral worlds. Other alien governments are asking about our intentions. So Young understood the concern. What humanity was doing to the Vorthons was unprecedented in galactic history. No one had ever destroyed an interstellar empire in a single day. Tell them we're eliminating a threat to galactic peace, she replied. The Vorthons broke every rule of civilized warfare when they executed Commander Hyunwoo. Dr. Taemin looked up from his intelligence station. Admiral, we're intercepting communications from Vorthon colonies. Several regional governors are declaring independence from the central government. Smart, So Young observed. They're trying to distance themselves from Thexvar's crimes. Captain Jin Ho, who had been monitoring Vorthon communications from the beginning, approached with a report. Ma'am, we're seeing mass resignations in their military command structure. Admirals, generals, even ship captains are abandoning their posts, so? Young nodded. This was exactly what she had hoped for. Fear was a powerful weapon, but so was the realization that their cause was hopeless. Why die for an empire that was already dead? Any word from General Thexvar himself? Nothing direct, Jinho replied. But our sources suggest he's refusing all surrender offers. He apparently believes the Vorthon military can still win this war. So Young allowed herself a cold smile. Then he's about to learn otherwise. In the Vega system, Lieutenant Boram was approaching her final target. The Vorthon fortress on Vega Prime was one of their most important defensive installations. It controlled access to 7 different star systems and housed 50,000 troops. Approaching weapons range, reported Sergeant Wu Jin. Prometheus charge armed and ready. Boram studied the tactical display. The fortress was built into a mountain, with massive energy shields and defensive weapons. Under normal circumstances, it would take a full battle fleet months to crack those defenses. But these weren't normal circumstances. Any response from the fortress? She asked. Ensign Heejin checked her communications. They're broadcasting surrender terms, ma'am. The commanding officer is requesting safe passage for his troops. Boram considered this. The fortress commander was being smart. He could see what had happened to other Vorthon installations. He knew his shields wouldn't stop a Prometheus weapon. Tell him he has 10 minutes to evacuate all personnel to a safe distance. Boram replied. After that, the fortress becomes a crater. She opened a channel to all Ghost Fleet vessels. All ships, this is Lieutenant Boram. Final phase beginning. Any Vorthon installation that surrenders gets 10 minutes to evacuate. Any installation that resists gets destroyed with all hands. Similar scenes were playing out across Vorthon space. Human commanders were offering mercy to those who surrendered, while promising destruction to those who continued fighting. Most Vorthon officers were choosing evacuation over death. On Vorthak Prime, General Thexvar watched his fortress commanders abandon their posts one by one. The great defensive line that had protected the Vorthon Empire for generations was collapsing, without a single battle being fought. "Sir," Colonel Zethal said quietly, "perhaps we should consider—" "No," Thexvar interrupted. "I will not surrender to these humans. They are weak. They are soft. This is just a trick, some kind of deception." But even as he spoke, another red light appeared on the tactical display. The fortress at Vega Prime had just been evacuated and destroyed. The humans weren't bluffing. They weren't playing games. They were systematically dismantling 2 centuries of Vorthon power. Lieutenant Yextar approached with another tablet. "General, Admiral Corvin is reporting that his battle fleet is running out of fuel. He's requesting permission to dock at civilian stations for resupply." "Denied," Thexvar said. "We don't refuel military vessels at civilian facilities." "But sir, if the fleet runs out of fuel, the ships will be stranded in space." Thexvar turned to face his aide. His yellow eyes blazed with fury and desperation. "Then they'll fight until their weapons run dry. They'll ram the human ships if necessary. They'll show these mammals what Vorthon honor means." But even as he spoke, Thexvar knew his words were empty. You couldn't ram ships you couldn't find. You couldn't fight enemies who struck from the shadows and disappeared before you could respond. The humans had played a perfect game of strategy, while the Vorthons had been playing at intimidation. Now the game was over and only one side was still standing. Back on Earth, Admiral So Young received the final reports from the Ghost Fleet. Every major Vorthon military installation had been destroyed or abandoned. Their empire still existed on paper, but they no longer had the power to enforce their will. "Phase 3 complete," reported Colonel Minji. "All primary objectives eliminated. The Vorthon military is no longer capable of offensive operations," So Young nodded. It had taken 18 hours to reduce one of the galaxy's most powerful empires to a collection of defenseless colonies. All because they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated what humans would do to protect their own. 18 hours after Commander Hyunwoo's execution, the Vorthon Empire officially ceased to exist as a military power. General Thexvar stood alone in his command center, watching the last of his battle fleets drift helplessly through space, their fuel tanks empty and their crews abandoning ship. The great display screens that once showed Vorthon dominance across the galaxy now showed nothing but red warning lights and empty communication channels. Colony after colony had declared independence. Admiral after admiral had surrendered their fleets to human forces or simply deserted their posts. Colonel Zethal approached his general one final time. The intelligence officer's scales had turned completely gray with stress and exhaustion. "Sir," he said quietly, "Admiral So Young is transmitting on all frequencies. She's offering final terms." Thexvar turned to face the main screen. The human admiral appeared, her face calm and professional. Behind her, he could see the command center of Earth Defense Command, filled with officers working at their stations with quiet efficiency. "General Thexvar," So Young began, "your empire is finished. Your military is destroyed. Your colonies are in rebellion. You have one choice left. Surrender yourself for trial or watch as we systematically destroy every Vorthon installation in the galaxy." Thexvar's hands shook with rage and humiliation. "You think you've won, human? This is just one battle. The Vorthon people will never bow to you." So Young's expression didn't change. "The Vorthon people are welcome to join the galactic community as peaceful citizens, but your military leadership will answer for war crimes, starting with the murder of Commander Hyunwoo." The transmission ended. Thexvar stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then walked to his private office. He knew what he had to do. He had brought this disaster upon his people through pride and cruelty. Honor demanded that he face the consequences, but when Colonel Zethal found him an hour later, Thexvar was dead by his own hand, a ceremonial blade through his heart. He had left a note claiming full responsibility for the war and the Empire's destruction. The news of Thexvar's suicide spread quickly through what remained of Vorthan space. It marked the end of not just a war but of an entire era. The Vorthan Empire that had ruled through fear for 2 centuries was gone forever. On Earth, President Daewon stood before a massive crowd gathered in Geneva. Representatives from dozens of species had come to hear humanity's response to the galactic crisis. The president's words would be broadcast to every civilized world in known space. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, "yesterday we witnessed an act of barbarism that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The execution of Commander Hyunwoo was not just an attack on humanity, but an attack on the basic dignity that should protect all prisoners of war." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. The Vorthans wanted to send a message with their cruelty. They believed that fear would make us submit to their rule. They thought that distance would protect them from justice. Daewon paused, his voice growing stronger. They were wrong. Commander Hyunwoo died believing he was alone and forgotten. He could not know that his sacrifice would unite not just humanity, but every decent species in the galaxy against those who would make war upon the helpless. Behind him, a holographic display showed images from the memorial services being held across human space. Millions of people had gathered to honor Hyunwoo's memory and to witness the birth of a new era in galactic politics. The Vorthans thought they were ending one human life. President Daewon continued. Instead, they ended their own empire. But this is not a victory to celebrate. This is a tragedy that could have been avoided if they had chosen honor over cruelty. Admiral So-young sat in the front row, still wearing her uniform from the command center. Next to her sat the families of every human prisoner who had died in Vorthan custody over the past decade. They had all come to see justice finally served. "Today," the president announced, "I am signing the Hyunwoo Protocols into law. These new regulations will govern the treatment of prisoners of war throughout human space. But more importantly, I am calling upon all civilized species to adopt similar protections." The protocols were comprehensive. They guaranteed medical care for prisoners, protected them from torture and public humiliation, and established an interstellar court to prosecute war crimes. Most significantly, they authorized immediate military intervention against any government that violated these basic principles. Ambassador Ji Woo, humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, stepped forward to address the crowd. "The Ghost Fleet will remain active," she announced, "not as a tool of conquest but as protectors of these new laws. Any species that chooses to violate the rights of prisoners will face the same fate as the Vorthan Empire." In the weeks that followed, 23 alien governments formally adopted the Hyunwoo Protocols. 3 others that had been considering aggressive expansion suddenly announced their commitment to peaceful development. The message was clear. The galaxy had changed, and the old rules no longer applied. Lieutenant Boram stood at attention in the memorial garden on Earth where Commander Hyunwoo's empty grave had been placed. His body had never been recovered from the Vorthan ship, but his sacrifice was honored alongside thousands of other heroes who had died for human freedom. The simple headstone read, "Commander Hyunwoo, 7th Special Forces Group." He kept the faith. Boram had requested this assignment after returning from her mission. She and the other Ghost Fleet commanders had become heroes across human space. But she didn't feel like celebrating. 50,000 Vorthan officers had died because their leaders chose cruelty over honor. He would have wanted peace, she said to Sergeant Woo Jin, who stood beside her. Hyunwoo always said the best victory was the one that prevented the next war. Woo Jin nodded. "Do you think we did that?" "Prevented the next war?" Boram looked up at the stars visible through the memorial garden's glass dome. Somewhere up there, former Vorthan colonies were learning to govern themselves peacefully. Former enemies were requesting to join the galactic community as equals rather than conquerors. "I think we changed the rules," she replied. "Every dictator and warlord in the galaxy now knows that there are consequences for their actions. They can't hide behind distance or superior numbers anymore." Colonel Minji approached the memorial with a data tablet in her hand. She had been working around the clock to coordinate the Ghost Fleet's transition from a secret weapon to a peacekeeping force. "Lieutenant," she said to Boram, "we've received a request from the Andromedan Republic. They want Ghost Fleet protection during their transition to democratic government." Boram looked at the tablet. The Andromedans had been ruled by a military dictatorship for 3 centuries. Now they were trying to establish civilian government, but they feared their own generals might attempt a coup. "What's our response?" Boram asked. "Admiral So Young wants to send 2 ghost ships," Minji replied. "Just their presence should be enough to discourage any military adventurism." It was a new role for the Ghost Fleet, but Boram found she liked it better than their original mission. They were no longer weapons of destruction hiding in the darkness. They were guardians of peace, ensuring that the strong could not prey upon the weak. 3 months after the fall of the Vorthon Empire, President Daiwan received a communication that surprised him. It came from Vorthak Prime, the former capital of the Vorthon homeworld. The message was from Elder Sothara, a civilian leader who had taken control after the military government collapsed. She was an old Vorthon female who had spent decades advocating for peace and reform. President Daiwan, her translated message began, "I speak for the new Vorthon Republic. We formally request to join the galactic community under the Hyunwoo protocols. We renounce all claims to our former territories and ask only for the chance to rebuild our society, based on honor rather than conquest." The message continued. "We have erected a memorial to Commander Hyunwoo in our capital city, not because you demanded it, but because his death showed us the cost of our former government's cruelty. He died with more honor than our generals lived with." President Daiwan shared the message with Admiral So Young and the rest of his cabinet. The room was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think?" he asked So Young. The admiral considered the question carefully. "I think," she said finally, "that this is what Hyunwoo would have wanted. He died believing in the possibility of honor and justice. If the Vorthons are sincere about embracing those values, then his death wasn't in vain." 6 months later, the former Vorthon Republic was formally admitted to the Galactic Council as a junior member. Their first act was to establish an interstellar academy dedicated to teaching the principles of ethical warfare and prisoner treatment. The academy was named the Hyunwoo Institute. Commander. Hyunwoo had died believing he was alone, abandoned by his people in the vast darkness of space. He could not have known that his death would reshape the galaxy, that his final words about faith and honor would become the foundation of a new era of peace. He had kept the faith, and Earth had remembered her children.